All right, good morning. It is Meme War Monday, and I am not going to show you the meme today. Now, I'm not going to show you the meme today because it came to me across my Facebook, and I don't want to out whoever it is that's in the comments down there. With one exception, if I see him pop up in the chat thread, I'll I'll say who it is. There's a few other people who commented on it as well, but we'll call it an exchange for now. I made a comment and a buddy of mine replied to it. And like I said, hopefully he'll pop up and let me know that he's watching in just a second here. But there's not a lot of image on it. There's just a picture of somebody holding a white sign that says, if you're wearing a mask, why would you care if I'm not? Your mask works, right? And then there's a reply, and this is the whole meme. If you're sober, why would you care if I was driving drunk? Your seatbelt and airbags work, right? Okay, so this argument is pure fallacy. Um, that is a straw man argument. That is almost the definition of a straw man argument. But Cameron, you had some thoughts on this. Let me get a little devil's advocate out of you before I tear into it.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on it are. I generally agree with you that this is a fallacy. That you're the biggest difference is you are not allowed to drive drunk. It's not that you are required to drive sober. It's that driving drunk is illegal. Whereas having a mask mandate is you must wear a mask. And when the law compels you to do things is where things get tricky. Like, that's part of the problem with Obamacare. I mean, forget the fact that it's socialist bullshit and all that other stuff. One of the biggest problems I had with Obamacare was the fact that it was going to make health insurance compulsory. And no, 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 no.
So funny thing about, and I'm glad you brought that up. Funny thing about the compulsory, it was actually called the individual mandate. Um, with the exception of maybe wearing clothes in public, the government does not mandate that you take specific actions without significant caveats. For example, affirmative action, right? So when the government mandates that you take an action, that is in fact in law called affirmative action mandate, right? Without talking about hiring quotas and racism and blah blah blah, just if the government says you will buy dogs, that is an affirmative action mandate by legal definition. And that is something that we don't do. The government in our country, with very, very limited exception, does not have the authority to issue an affirmative action mandate. Now, the caveat there, we have tolerated, and I see you in the chat here, Cody. And yes, it's Cody's rebuttal that I'm going to address in just a second here. Um, with very, very limited exceptions, we do not, under American law, tolerate affirmative action mandates from the government. And when we do, with the exception of the mandate that you will wear clothing in public, which is arbitrary and unnecessary, uh, with that exception, and by the way, for good reason, that exception has been eroded substantially over the last several years. Uh, Dad and I were talking about how awesome it was when we were living in Maine, and because of the arguments for equal protection under the law, all of a sudden we saw some laws change, and women were outside topless mowing their grass on Saturdays. What's the problem? I worked out for us. Anyway, um, so on the question of drunk driving, like Cameron said, you are not mandated to drive sober. You are forbidden to drive drunk, and that is an important difference. It's the same important difference that distinguishes your having to have car insurance from your having to have life insurance. With the car insurance question, it is thou shalt not drive on a public road You will not use a government service unless you take this explicit precaution. And please believe that's a relatively novel law. That was not the case until the 80s. I'll look it up real quick, but I mean it has been it's pretty recent in the history of law. Um the first state to require liability car insurance in 1925 was New York, but it it was not that widespread that early. Anyway, even in that case, um yeah, most states did not require it until the 1970s. And even then there were still two holdouts. But the point there is you're not required to have car insurance if you don't have a car. Or let's say you're a farmer, you own a big farm and you have a pickup truck that never leaves the farm. You only drive it on the farm for the work of the farm. You don't have to have car insurance on it because you're not driving it on a public road. However, with the individual mandate for Obamacare, you're being required to do something in order to live. The the precondition for being required to buy health insurance under Obamacare is that you're not dead or that you exist. Well, that's ludicrous. That's just hey, for the privilege of surviving, we're going to charge you money. That's very different than saying for the service of providing health care, we're going to charge you a reasonable fee. Now, when you start talking about the mask mandate, let me be clear on this from the jump too. Cameron and I talked about the masks early in the pandemic. In fact, we talked about this when the when the majority of the media, including Dr. Fauci, we were talking about masks back in December, right? By the time I had masks matching most of my shirts because they're all bespoke, Fauci was still saying, not only do you not need masks, he was actually telling us, no, the masks are harmful and will increase your chances of getting COVID because it means that you're going to touch your face more and da 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 da. You'll notice you been hearing people talk about touching their face. Haven't even haven't even been hearing Sargon of Akkad making fun of AOC for touching her face 97 times in a 3 minute speech about not touching your face, right? That apparently we can touch our faces all we want now. That's just not a problem anymore. Somehow that no longer increases your chances of getting COVID. Kind of like being in a large crowd. Okay, you've done enough. You've, you've, you've beleaguered my point. And thank you, but I'm quite capable of doing that myself. So as early as that, long before Dr. Fauci stopped telling us that masks were dangerous and that we shouldn't wear them, and then it turned out that oh no, we should all be wearing masks according to Dr. Fauci, and it turns out that he was lying to us to begin with because they were afraid that there wouldn't be enough masks for the medical people, and and oh yeah, please believe back then, all these same assholes on the mainstream media that are telling you you're a bad person if you don't wear a homemade mask and that you need to go out and buy designer masks and all this shit. Um, yeah, when we were already talking about wearing masks to protect other people, not to protect yourself because they're not effective, they will not prevent you from catching the virus. They will delimit the degree to which you, if you are infected, spread the virus, right? When we were already talking about that, the same assholes that are making you feel guilty about going out with a naked face were making fun of you for having a thin piece of cloth over your face. So don't believe that horse shit. Now, so I think we're clear here. I've been on the mask train from the jump. as a reasonable voluntary measure. Where we have a problem is the mandate. So, and I'm going to read you the comments exactly. I said, this is a straw man. You are comparing the authority of the state to forbid a specific action to the state assuming the authority to compel actions. One of these authorities could protect unborn children from infanticide for convenience, while the other permits the one child policy and involuntary abortion and sterilization in Uyghur concentration camps. The slippery slope is not a fallacy. The slippery slope argument is the valid and correct description of the inevitability of government growth. Okay, we went from nobody wants to take your guns away to hell yeah, I'm going to take your AR-15s like that. We went from nobody's against gay marriage to you're all transphobes overnight after the Obergefell decision. Okay, and that's I'm not going to relitigate Obergefell right here, but those are perfectly salient descriptions and examples of the slippery slope, not fallacy, the slippery slope certainty. So, amid the same gross overreach for government power, we've seen situations like the McCloskeys, who were absolutely 100% within the law to defend their property with firearms, and have now been forced to surrender their firearms by the law. That should terrify everyone. So, and Cody's here, so I'm going to say his name. Uh, Replies, if the state has the ability to forbid actions, is it not fair to say that the state has already assumed the authority to compel actions? Absolutely. 100% not. The state has not assumed, has not been granted the authority to compel actions. And uh, I'll address the rest of your argument in a minute, but you mentioned the social contract. Um, the social contract is a philosophical theory, and it is not the Constitution of the United States of America. The 10th Amendment is very clear. All those powers and authorities which are not explicitly enumerated and granted to the federal government are reserved to the state and then to the people. Individual states have their own constitutions, which cede certain powers and authorities to the government. Those also, by a wide margin, do not cede all power to the state government from the individual, and you will be hard pressed to find one. I'm sure you can find one or two where the language gives it away, but the state constitutions are also pretty reticent to surrender affirmative authority to the government. The government has the authority to take actions and generally the authority to forbid the causing of harm to others. Well, in the case of the mask, you can't even make a cogent argument that demanding the mask is preventing harm to others as long as you cannot show that the masks are effective. Given that all the masks you see people wearing, unless they're handmade and therefore not quality controlled by an agency, they have a warning label on them that explicitly says that it's not effective for reducing viral infection, that it is not a reasonable protective measure against viral or bacterial infection. As my cousin, the pharmacologist, put it, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but viruses are really, 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 really small.
Yeah, and besides, how many people have you seen doing this right here?
And every time I see somebody with their nose hanging over the top of the mask, all I can think about is uh, is that meme with the dick hanging over the underwear. I just every time I see somebody with their nose hanging over the mask, I just want to point at them and shout, "Dick face, dick face! We got a dick face over here!" So now to the rest of your argument, Cody. I understand the distinguishing factors as pointed out. However, the actions taken by the state are not dictated by the limitations of what actions can be taken, but rather the actions that society will tolerate. False. The actions taken by the state, like I said, are explicitly dictated by the 10th Amendment. So, sorry, Cody. I think you need to go reread the Constitution. You okay?
And
If
that's
you
not
have
to say that
if you have raised your hand and sworn the oath and worn the uniform, then I put it that you should, like me, get a copy of the Constitution. I like the little pocket copy that's made to look like a miniature copy of the Constitution, but even just the app on your phone. Get yourself a copy of the Constitution that you can keep handy and read it on the shitter. Now, it's not the only thing I read on the shitter because I've already read it a dozen times or so. Um, Probably hundreds of times actually, because I've been in this habit for 20 years. Uh, oh, good. Rod says the Missouri Attorney General dismissed the case against the McCloskeys. I'll I'll have to read up on that because that would be a very new news item. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. Thank you for the update, though, Rod. Um, the 10th Amendment is very explicit. If the authority is not explicitly granted by the Constitution, then it is an authority that the U.S. government does not have. We're not going to relitigate the question of criminalizing marijuana in this discussion, but I'm just going to bring it up as an example real quick because it's such a clear example, such a very clear and easy example. Currently, there are controls on certain substances against your ability to produce, consume, acquire, distribute, or retain them. We did that before with prohibition, but there's a big difference.
we passed a constitutional amendment to allow it to happen.
The 18th Amendment to the Constitution instituted prohibition against alcohol. And then, because the government did not have the authority to prohibit alcohol, so it had to be a constitutional convention. And then, in order to repeal that, another constitutional amendment was made by Constitutional Convention to repeal the 18th Amendment by making another amendment, the 21st Amendment. The, the 21st Amendment repeals the 18th Amendment, but the 18th is an amendment, and so it remains as an amendment which has been repealed by a later amendment. In the case of the forbiddance of controlled substances, it was done as an argument made under the Commerce Clause, which is grossly unconstitutional. The lawyers that argued for controlled substances under the Commerce Clause should be hanged as traitors because what they have done is sworn an oath as servants of the court to uphold and defend the Constitution, and then intentionally and explicitly broken that oath in the explicit with the explicit intent of circumventing the 10th Amendment for the purpose of expanding government authority unconstitutionally. That's treason. That is actively giving aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States of America, and doing so with more than two witnesses. Unfortunately, most of those guys have died of old age now, but um, mm. Rod makes the point that childhood vaccines are compelled. That's only sort of true. It's true, and it's a little more true than the car insurance argument, but it's if you use certain services to have the child, then the vaccines are compelled. Um, like
Well, yeah,
my
basically
my
you can't.
eldest daughter, or for my eldest daughter, the vaccines were compelled because we had her in a military hospital. That's where we were. Um,
Well, and the big check on it is if you send your children to public school, the public school system, uh, that's actually what's compelling you. You cannot vaccinate your children just by homeschooling them. I, while I do think that homeschool is good, I think it's kind of dumb to not vaccinate your kids. You know anybody under 50 that's ever had polio?
Now, and yeah, on that, my children are vaccinated and we homeschool. So, because, I want my children to be shaped correctly, like children.
So anyhow, buddy, it's 5 minutes after 8. I gotta go make the donuts.
Oh, oh. Okay. So, mandates bad. Man, we didn't even get into we didn't even get into all the Target and Walmart stuff over how they had to walk back their mandates. Target and Walmart have walked back their mask mandates basically because the legal team said, "No, Americans with Disabilities Act. You can't refuse service to people based on disabilities. There are disabilities which require people which prevent people from wearing masks, like asthma and certain breathing COPD and a few others. And then because of HIPAA, you can't ask a person what their disability is if they say they can't wear a mask. So,
You're
so
gonna have to
there's
stop, stop,
so
stop, stop.
Best Buy, however, has not walked it back. Best Buy is continuing to act in flagrant violation of the ADA and HIPAA. Um, and hey, if y'all want to go get a lawyer and deal with that, go try to shop at Best Buy and then hire a lawyer. Good luck to you. That's not legal advice. That's an interesting gamble.
Yeah,
So,
that's all I
um,
got. Actually, I have more, but I have to get on
yeah.
down the road.
All right, brother. Talk to you tomorrow.
Yes,
Y'all be
sir.
safe out there, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Here it comes.